Hey everyone, welcome to week 9. This is going to be a very quick one. We do have a bunch of readings for this week, but I also want you guys to work on your actual prototypes. But, evaluation and compliance, there isn't really anything too intellectually stimulating here. The readings will give you some idea of what evaluation and compliance means to different people. So please go through those if you haven't already. Just want to go through some admin things really quickly. Just wanted to correct last week's lecture where I said we looked at ethics from a health and safety standpoint in weeks 3 and 4, but in fact, of course, we were looking at it in weeks 2 and 3. I've updated the slides, but can't be bothered to update the recordings, so here's the correction. Okay, evaluation and compliance. If you were to ask me, I would say that the most important of these two is evaluation. I mean, compliance is not that difficult. You just basically have to fit a bunch of criteria, like either it's the law or, your customers or clients have said it needs to fit these criteria. So I guess that's not too much of a challenge in terms of actually seeing if you've met the criteria, because you just look at what you have at the moment and see if it meets the criteria. It's just a simple comparison. The more interesting part is actually coming up with ways to meet the criteria, at least to me anyway. And that's pretty much what our design process is all about, right? Sometimes criteria might actually end up competing with each other, and we have to use creative design to actually make them fit. And one of the prime ways for us to do this, one of the prime mechanisms for us to be able to do this, is just test the hell out of our designs, the iterative design process. That's why it's so important to have a very functional prototype very, very early, because then you can find problems. But it's very easy to sweep problems under the rug, right? The key thing for good evaluation is actually honesty. I might have said this earlier in the term, but us as creative people, we can get very attached to our designs. We work hard on them. We think that we've developed all these skills to actually come up with them. It's very easy just to say that our design is magnificent. Well, we need to test them, right? We need to remember the square hole girl video.
This is a square. Can you guess which spot that goes in?
The square.
That's right. It goes in the square hole.
Yes. Okay.
And how about this rectangle? That one
Also the square.
that goes in there too.
Yeah.
Up next, we've got this thin rectangle.
The thin rectangle.
Can you guess where that goes?
The thin rectangle.
That's right. It goes in the square hole. And up next, a cylinder.
The circle.
I think that goes in
The circle.
the square hole. Now, we've also got this semicircle right here. Do you see a slot that would fit
The semicircle.
semicircle?
The semicircle.
That's right, it's the square hole. Okay. Up next, the triangle. We know what hole that goes
The
into,
triangle.
right?
Triangle.
That's right, the square hole. And up next, we have the arch.
The arch. The
And
arch.
you guessed it.
The arch.
It goes in the square hole.
God.
And I just love this video because it's hilarious, number one, but it just encapsulates what we need for a good evaluation process. So let's think about this really quickly. Number one, the user had complete agency within the, I guess we'll call it the application. Square Hole Girl had no influence in what the user would actually have done while they were doing it. The only influence that she had was the pre-design of the application. And in the video, that's the shapes toy. The next thing to notice was she had a very clear expectation of what the user was supposed to be doing in terms of how she designed it. And we can see this very clearly. User goes, where does this shape go? And then Square Hole Girl gives the right answer, but then the user is like, it's the square hole. So according to the original criteria, that was a failure in design. And Square Hole Girl was honest in saying, wow, that's a failure in design, and then gives a negative reaction. And this is important to note because you can very much change the result of a test just by changing the original criteria. And that's obviously an invalid test, but I've seen that happen. So we need to be honest with this. The only way to fix this is actually change the design and then test it again, not change the criteria of the test to say that the test was successful, even though it wasn't. And this is a bit of a callback to week 7, where we had a look at a typical project cycle, and we can see a couple of iterative design cycles, both in the concept ideation and in the actual concept production. And you can kind of glean this in the readings for this week. For example, the Matthew Farrelly video explains how they had limited space in the training area, and then he was talking about all the different ways they were able to utilize the space but still meet the requirements for training. I know it's a bit of a callback to week 2, where we're talking about different locomotion schemes. And yeah, they were different locomotion schemes, but in a sense, locomotion is a response to 2 competing criteria, in that you have limited space but unlimited virtual space, and you need to reconcile those 2 things somehow. But keeping on the topic of training applications, we have a meta design requirement for evaluation, because very often we would use the application to evaluate whoever's being trained, but then that evaluation also needs to be evaluated whether the evaluation was correct. And this is where you would depend on your domain experts, just you show them, this is how I'm testing that the trainee is competent, and the domain expert will be able to tell you if it's missing any key points, and then I guess you can go back and go implement those key points. The readings have really good examples, but another example I might contribute is, let's say it's a surgery training tool. You spent all this time simulating flesh, muscles, and all that, and it looks super accurate. And then you show it to a clinician, and then they ask, when I do an incision over here, it feels really airy, because you didn't think about the haptics. And that's what they would care about most in some situations. Okay, let's wrap up. What is the TLDR of compliance and evaluation? Well, the key thing for me, again, I just have to reiterate, is honesty. You need to actually just have some kind of integrity in terms of the test. If you test something, did it actually succeed? Don't change the criteria for success post-test. I mean, you can do that, but then you need to alter what you say your design can actually achieve. Otherwise, you do the usual thing of actually altering your design and try to succeed at the same test. That's the core of it for me. The rest is kind of fluff. So yeah, evaluation and testing happens through the entire cycle, all the way from ideation through to production, and then finally before you deliver the project. And the last point I'll make about final delivery testing, I guess it'd be good if at the end of a project you've met all the values that you have as a designer, and if you're part of a wider organization, you've met all the values that you have as an organization. And I guess if you want to get paid, you need to have met the client's requirements. And I guess if you want to stay out of jail, you also need to not do anything illegal. Yeah, that's it basically from me. Yeah, looking forward to seeing your prototypes. See you in class.